The Speaker of the House, a Democrat, she was assassinated along with her husband at their home. Two other people, another Democrat and his wife, I think, or husband, were also shot, except they survived or have survived so far. So at least one elected politician, who's I think been in that office for like 20 years, was assassinated. There was a big manhunt, apparently the largest in the state's history, and he's now the suspect, let's be clear, has now been arrested. Vance Luther Balter, 57, charged with killing Melissa Hortman, a Minnesota Democrat, and her husband, Mark Hortman. When he was captured, he had a long list of other people he was going to assassinate. And there was a lot of other violence this past weekend that is not being mentioned. Keep in mind, as all this violence is going on, Donald Trump is parading fucking tanks down Main Street in Washington, D.C. That's what he wants you to know. This same weekend, and these things are kind of like barely being talked about, a protester was shot and killed at a No Kings rally in Utah. The No Kings rallies were large-scale protests across the country against Donald Trump. Now, my issue with them, the reason I wasn't, yelling, everybody get out to your No Kings rally. My issue is twofold. One is I don't know that these parades do much. I think if you want to create change, you have to interrupt business as usual. These parades interrupt no business. They are good for activating younger people kind of just learning about this stuff. So, okay, do that, but just know that it's a parade. It's to let people know about these issues rather than actually creating any change. So that's one thing. The other issue is if you look at the posters and the pamphlets and everything else that was put up for the No Kings rally, I realize I'm dating myself by saying pamphlets. Like, honestly, who has a fucking pamphlet? Where the fuck are we? What, you got a printer in your basement? Okay, TikToks. If you look at the TikToks for the No Kings rally, they failed to mention Gaza. They failed to mention a U.S.-backed genocide under Trump's watch that Trump is shipping missiles to every goddamn day. And if you can't mention that, then what are you? What do you stand for? What the fuck are you? So that is why that's a red line for me. If you can't say Gaza, then there's something wrong with you. The reason I'm highlighting this is because I'm talking more about all of this violence we saw this past weekend. A protester was shot and killed at a No Kings rally in Utah by one of the peacekeepers. A man who was believed to be part of the peacekeeping team. Like, literally, they're wearing, like, vests. They are the peacekeepers. And he shot and killed an innocent person. Now, apparently, he was aiming for a guy who pulled out a rifle, which double what the fuck. So this guy pulls out a rifle. The peacekeeper pulls out his gun, which I didn't know at these parades peacekeepers had guns, but pulls out his gun, fires at the guy with the rifle, shoots an innocent bystander, and kills him in Salt Lake City. Shot a person who was brandishing a rifle at demonstrators, striking both the rifleman and a bystander who later died. Police took the alleged rifleman, Arturo Gamboa, 24, into custody. Salt Lake City police chief said at a news conference the bystander was Arthur Folasa Alu, 39, a fashion designer from Samoa. So that happened this weekend, barely getting any coverage. Also this weekend at No Kings protests in Virginia and San Francisco, both cities, the protesters were hit by cars, meaning in both cities, vehicles tried to run over and murder protesters. This is 3 separate cities that had deadly or near deadly attacks on peaceful protests. I have my issues with a march created for the liberals, but it doesn't mean that their heart isn't in the right place. They're marching because many of them are anti-war, even though they don't understand how the system works. They're opposed to ICE raids that are destroying families and destroying lives. So they're trying to do the right thing, even though they don't understand the political system as it works and that both parties are working towards the same corporate rule. But for doing that, they're attacked and murdered or nearly murdered. And, maybe I have a bit more anger around this than some people and think this is a bigger deal than some other people seem to, considering how little news coverage has gotten. But maybe I do, because I was nearly murdered by one of these psychopaths at a rally. I was about 5 feet from the Charlottesville terrorist. And I don't know why we stopped calling them terrorists, because they're behind the wheel of a car instead of with a gun. But I was 5 feet from where he drove through the crowd. Me and Eleanor both were within feet. I mean, we saw people hit the ground after being hit by the car, landing at our feet. And it's just sheer luck that only one person was killed when that happened, as opposed to dozens. And the only reason it was only one person is because it just so happened that there was a stopped van in the middle of the street because it couldn't move because there were so many people marching. And the terrorist white supremacist cunt drove into the back of the van and couldn't keep going. If he had kept going, he would have driven through another, 50 people or something. But protesters at No Kings events in Culpeper, Virginia and San Francisco have been struck by motorists. Police identified in Culpeper, Virginia, they identified 21-year-old, who, let's not give him more publicity, 21-year-old asshole McJr. No injuries have been reported, so he did a poor job of his terrorism. In San Francisco, at least 4 No Kings protesters were struck by a motorist who fled the scene. But I think, what does this uniquely have to do with the United States? Well, we are an empire of violence. I think that's an important factor of all this. We are an empire of violence. We use violence to solve every single issue around the world, as we're doing right now by supporting Israel's violence and murder against Iran, by supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza. We are an empire of violence. When we've tried these, just a few other tools we have, like economic war, we then resort to missiles and bombs and guns rather quickly. And of course, economic war is also violence because people starve to death. So we act like it's not violence. It absolutely is. Now, of course, another factor of this is the fact that the United States has just an endless array of guns in everyone's pockets, as opposed to many other countries. But I'd say probably even 2 other important factors, which are never mentioned for the most part, is inequality. It's always connected to violence. It always creates violence. The more inequality you have, the more violence you'll see. Now, of course, violence is multiple things. It could be these assholes driving through crowds, but it could also be the violence of forcing people off healthcare and forcing them off of food stamps and forcing them to starve to death. That's violence as well. So when you have a mass inequality in the richest empire the world has ever known, you're going to see a lot of violence. It's inevitable. It's part of the process. It's part of the calculation. And the ruling elite just view it as, the collateral damage. And finally, another factor in this is just how crazy the propaganda is, which has gotten the people who drove through these crowds, to believe that probably, I'm guessing, maybe they're white supremacists and they just want to kill people. I don't know. But a lot of them have believed the absolute garbage propaganda coming from Fox News or News Nation or whatever the far right wing are. Now, that is not to say, if you follow my stuff, I talk about the propaganda coming out of CNN and CBS all day long, and the 48 other liberal news channels and the New York Times, etc. But if you look at the statistics, who are the people that are involved in many of these mass shooter events, many of the driving through protests? Almost exclusively, though not always exclusively, but almost exclusively far right-wing extremists. And one more factor, we don't know this about any of the people that drove through crowds this weekend. We don't yet know this about the guy who murdered people, assassinated people in Minnesota. But the number one predictor of whether someone is going to try and commit a mass casualty event and usually be more successful, let's be honest, at killing a lot of people, is ex-military, some connection to the U.S. military. If you look at many of the largest mass killing events in the United States, ex-military. Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma bombing, which was not just him. I just did a big segment on that, but he was obviously the trigger man. Timothy McVeigh, ex-military. Terry Nichols, ex-military. The 2 attacks that were on New Year's Eve this year, both ex-military. And I'm just listing a few off the top of my head, but it's the number one predictor of large, successful mass casualty events in the United States. And none of those factors I gave you are generally ever talked about in your mainstream media. They just go, a man drove through people and tried to kill people in Virginia. Wow, weird. End of story. No more than that.